But then a person came from that X organization and had everything ticked. Yes, it will be provided. The things which we had asked were very ambitious, and we had no ways of testing whether the equipment supplied has it or doesn't have it. So we were in a dilemma. What do we do now? How do we remove this kind of a threat? So again, we had discussions, and then we were able to convince our seniors that L1 should not be considered here, and whatever happened there was different. But what I'm coming to is that the policies or other things, as was the question in IoT and other elements which are the new concepts, we have to be very, very cautious and not accept anything on the face value. And while we are thinking about the policy, aligning it, we must have discussions with our own indigenous companies who are at par with international standards. We recently had gone to Israel and visited number of startups. The discussion there also which was happening was that India has the potential, and there are quite a few startups in India also who are in fact better than international startups, and the technologies that they are bringing are amazing. So we should incorporate that as well while we are thinking of it, and not get overwhelmed with the big names and the quality of the services which are showcased. I don't know if I've been able to answer your question or confused it, but...
No, you have, because that's been one thing, that whether are we looking at the background, it's not only what product are we getting, but are we also looking at the background of the suppliers who are actually providing these services and products. For a simple thing, I think, in the morning session, one of the panelists said that, Alexa. And I'm sure all of you would have known that if we all have a Google phone, the moment we talk about something, tonight we will all be getting, updates about cybersecurity or, stuff like that. It'll all be coming in our feeds, whether it's Twitter, whether it's Facebook, whether it's, in fact, I don't have any of those apps. I just keep switching them off only for that reason, because any social media is just listening to us these days and is talking about it. Kinshuk, in fact, that comes to my next point with you. You have 3,000 companies which Tata TCS has been this thing, most of them across the globe. And here we have certain decision makers, from the defense services who are actually actively looking at cyber security, cyber warfare, and they're actually looking at how to protect this thing. What are the threat vectors you think they should be look out for? When they are actually preparing these, as Colonel Zaidi said, when they are preparing these BOQs or RFPs, what are the points they should be looking at? Can you share some insights about what are the future threats do you think? We've seen so many ransomware or malware attacks on Indian public sector utilities for whatever reason. And how can they actually ensure that, our borders, our data, our security agencies are far more protected? And what should they be look out for?
Thanks. So in the morning, I think the first session, General Pant said PPT. I think that covers everything. You need good people. That means at the end of it, it's strategic, tactical, operational. You need, at somebody to give the policy, your, let's say, InfoSec policy within an enterprise or within the Army or Navy or Air Force or any police force or law enforcement at that level. How are you going to further, ensure that it finally just making a document, unless there's enforcement, nothing works. At the end of it, so you have to enforce it. So and thereafter, at an operational level, things have to be done. So that is people. Obviously, you need technology. Typically, every large enterprise, I'm saying large enterprise means somebody who's got about 100,000 people. Let's just say like the Navy, about 100,000, Air Force like the 100,000, or the Army, which is more than about 500,000, or railways or any large such organization. Obviously, you need certain, you've got an enterprise, that means it's a citadel. Today, obviously the citadel is not there because you've got your workforce who's now an endpoint. That means he's a mobile who's connected onto your your main, environment or your network. So obviously because of this breaking down of your things, so obviously you need now your attack surface is very large
Very
now.
large.
You're doing business. Obviously, you started doing business. Let's say a railways. He's got various, messaging system. For the railways. I'm not talking about internal messaging. All that is going across. Your bookings, everything. So obviously, for various businesses, now you've opened so many apps. Like I talked about that incident. That organization had 70 applications internet facing. Okay, so you've obviously attack surface is so much. Every application has to be security tested for source code testing, right? We always say shift left at source code level and at a dynamic level. That means you do your dynamic application security testing. Infrastructure. Sandeep before this talked about patching. We see organizations, they've got over 100,000, 1 lakh vulnerabilities of, systems which are not patched. You're running Windows Vista, Windows 7, your legacy operating system which are end of life. IoT is another. I'm not going into that area because they have just a very small processor with very little operating system, very little, software over it, and obviously, they can just be. They are obviously prone to larger, many attacks. So there is a lot of work has to be done. It's not simple because obviously now you're taking advantage of IT to further your business. So you have to spend. Most organizations spend about 5% of their IT budget in cyber. I'm talking about matured, large enterprises. That has to be done. Application testing, your infrastructure testing, your network testing. So obviously, the way it is all described, you have to have your protection stack. Protection is like in your home, your antivirus, your basic home firewall, basic things. Detection, your SIM or your IDS, IPS, intrusion detection system, intrusion prevention system, all those stack of solution has to be there. Obviously, if there is something, then you have to respond, and you have to have your, you have to have backups, because at the end of it today, if you have a scenario like that and you don't have a backup, I had a customer called Swissport, which handles passenger services across 300 airports in Europe, and they faced a ransomware attack. Can you imagine what was the chaos in Europe? For 1 week, they had paper manifest to onboard passengers. So obviously, you have to invest. So second is technology. Obviously, now I will not go into whether you should go Atmanirbhar Bharat or should you go the other way. It's another subject. But I always buy the best in breed solution. You don't put a cheap lock in your house, do you? You don't. So buy the best. I also believe that there's no point in saying, I will build something secretly and I will throw it to the whole world to use it, test it. Like I'll give you a simple example, like EDR solution, CrowdStrike. I don't have no stakes in that company, but that tool helps us detect adversary in your environment at an endpoint level, or at a proxy level, Zscaler. These are global solutions, but they are good. Yeah. They are good. Or a Splunk SIM, or or any of many of these things. So there are in every stack best in breed solutions, and there are Indian solutions also. There are a lot of Indian good companies. So, but yes, at the end of it, Admiral is here. He went in for the best thing. You don't think. Now today, obviously, armed forces, if you got a competitor who is a 20-year-old motivated person with a glass of beer in his hand, sitting on a Friday night, you don't need a battalion or you don't need a brigade to attack. You just need a couple of smart guys to get in. So people, process, And you have to have the process. You have to have a consistent process that every time, if you're making a change in the firewall, it has to be approved, it has to go through the change management process of a CAB, it has to come, the SOC has to know that a change is being done, because the SOC will get an alert that a change in the firewall has been done, he will verify it, and the change will go through the whole process. So everything is very well defined. There are SOPs for everything, but enforcement is key. You have to do the whole 9 yards or whole hog.
I guess that's very, very critical, because until and unless you have the processes in place, you may educate your people, you may put the best of technology, but if you don't have processes in place, then there is just no way you can actually implement and ensure that you are cyber secure. That comes, Kanishk. You know, we in the morning session we also spoke about deterrence. Now, as far as the Indian IT policy is concerned, uh, whether it's a case of conviction rates, whether it's in terms of deterrence, it's very, very low. It's in fact the fear of law is not there, whereas you're trying to make a draconian law, but whether enforceability is there or not is not there. So what would you've been working with the government on various policy matters, etc. What is your view on that?
My view is that we need to enhance our cyber laws. The current IT Act, the way it is framed, makes it very difficult to put people behind bars, specifically for cyber crimes. I don't know how many people have been actually been convicted for cyber crime, and it's very easy to get bail on those. And this is a national security risk. So if you've got people who are actually running rackets, scams which impact national safety and security, there have to be provisions of putting them behind bar. And just looking at the current state of IT Act, I think there are a lot of loopholes. We are working towards creating the Digital India Act, but that's more to do with governance. The whole, various sections of the IT Act, whether we only use Section 69A, but the other sections, whether it is 43, 42, all of those require drastic improvements. Particularly if you look at cybercrime, that's becoming a nightmare today, because you've seen what's happening from Jamtara, Nu, and other places. And that doesn't impact just the consumers, you and me. Those electricity scams have gone now impacting our politicians, members of parliament, speaker of the house. They are also getting calls like us. But the data they have on their phones could be critical. If they lose that data, what are the measures you have to go after those criminals? And we were involved in investigating certain cybercrime, which was getting pointed towards Nigerians who were operating in this country. I'm sorry to bring out a particular country, but actually tracking them and then having a mechanism to go back to the Nigerian government, getting a group which is working from Nigeria, that's a big issue. Under what laws do you want to track